Good morning, everybody. It is an absolute pleasure to be with all of you here today, and thank you. For all of you that are joining us for the first time, welcome to Next Work. And for those of you that are coming for the second time, welcome back. Mike is absolutely right. I have been really looking forward to this event. And I'm going to kick it off with a bit of a vision that's much bigger than just Juniper Networks, a vision that certainly we have a role to play as a technology provider and a role that you all play in. But you, or those who know me well, also know that I can't just keep things at the 100,000 foot level. I'm going to distill that right down to what it means to what we do each and every day. And of course, that means technology. Now, I have to say, I often find myself in awe, in amazement at the world in which we live. I wake up every day, I ask Alexa to give me the news report and the weather forecast. My Runkeeper app tells me it's time to go for a run. I typically obey what my Runkeeper app tells me. My fitness monitor probably knows my health better than my doctor by this time. Before I leave the house, I set my Roomba to make sure that it's vacuuming when nobody's home with that little voice in the back of my head that says, why can't it just know it by itself by integrating with my calendar and maybe the motion detectors in the house? Unplug my car, head to work. My August door lock detects that I'm a certain distance away from the house and locks up the house for me. And with all that is happening around us, I think it's sort of sometimes easy to fall into this trap of believing that we're done. Innovation, or room for innovation, is sort of diminishing, and there's not much more to do. Could not disagree more with that notion. We are just getting started. And this innovation journey that we are on as an industry, it really has no destination. It's the journey itself that really matters. And I don't know about you, but I find it incredibly exciting, not only to participate in this world, to be the benefactors of all of this exciting change around us, but to help actually shape it. Now, I also believe that we're heading into an era where there are going to be some new factors at play that are only going to accelerate how fast we move as an industry. First and foremost, time to adoption of new ideas, new technologies, new business models has never been faster. Just a few years ago, who would have thought that we'd be pulling out our phones and ordering unmarked cars with random strangers driving us from point A to point B, and yet today over 1 billion of us have done just that because of the immense value, not just the economics, but the convenience of these new emerging technologies. Competition has honestly never been this great. We are living in an era where 5 people and an idea can disrupt an established company and multi-billion-dollar industries. And part of the reason is because access to technology has never been greater. Anybody has access to essentially an unlimited amount of compute and storage resources through the cloud immediately and cost-effectively. And even beyond that, access to the market through what has become the ultimate in human companions, the smartphone, has never been greater as well. Many of the great ideas and companies that were created in the dot-com boom then bust era died not necessarily because the ideas themselves were bad, but because the smartphone did not exist back then. That problem has been solved. And last but not least is economics. The pressure now felt by industries and consumers has never been greater from an economic standpoint, and the pursuit of greater value at less price is tremendous. So these forces are coming together now to create, like I said, a new era of innovation. And there will be new diamonds that are created in this era. And one might say, well, what are those new diamonds? Well, I don't have a crystal ball, But I do believe that that future is going to be about the integration of services, the integration of ideas. It's something that at Juniper we call digital cohesion. It is an era or a future in which applications connect in really interesting ways to create what are mega services that enhance our lives. We will move from a present today where we deal with point services to one in the future where we're now benefiting from incredible holistic mega services that truly enhance our lives. We will transform from what are essentially user-initiated tasks today to a future where services will be predictive and autonomous. There will be no manual work. We won't even need to summon these services. They just know when to appear and when to serve. Even decision-making will be reduced to a bare minimum. And while the services today that we experience each and every day tend to be static in nature, in the future, these services will be much more adaptive. They will learn about you. They will understand you in time. They'll understand your preferences, your habits, and they will get better as a result. So I want to drill this down to an example. We'll start with something a little lighthearted. But this is a question that I'm sure many of you ask each and every day, gets asked around the world by millions of people. What's for dinner? In the future, there will be a mega service provider that will pool together a diverse set of point services to integrate a holistic service that essentially eliminates the need to ever ask that question again. Now, of course, it starts with great knowledge and access to information. So this mega service will need to understand your fitness goals, data from your fitness monitors, your family schedule. It'll know what you like to eat, have eaten, what others, your friends, like to eat. It will understand what is in your refrigerator and pool them together to answer this question once and for all. The key here is that this will be a friction-free experience. Cars will not be ordered. Telephones will not be used to phone restaurants. Wallets will not be pulled out of pockets. Food appears at your front door. Ingredients are in your refrigerator with the recipe on your kitchen screen, knowing this is what you want when you want it and what you will enjoy. And the amazing thing is, these services, the point services themselves, all exist today, with a couple of exceptions maybe. The key here is somebody will pull them together in what is essentially a service fabric and create immense value for all of us. And while this is just a bit of a lighthearted glimpse into the future, I think we can get much more serious than that as well. The future of education. Education today is lacking funding, lacking teachers, lacking interesting curriculums. And it's been proven that children learn better from their experience than they do from a book or a classroom. In the digital cohesion era, schools will no longer be the main learning vehicle for your kids. It'll be their own life and their own experiences. So imagine a service provider that pools together, again, a set of services and creates incredible learning experiences for our children. Think of a child that is walking through a supermarket that puts on a set of augmented reality glasses and is presented with a game that allows her to pool together a set of foods to create what is a balanced meal for her family for $25. Or imagine your son walking through a historic land site like the Lincoln Memorial, looking up and seeing Martin Luther King actually recite his "I Have a Dream" speech. I mean, for somebody that is so passionate about education, especially education at a young age like I am, I find this future incredibly exciting. And it is not that far off because, in fact, there are those that are experimenting with early stages of these types of mega services for autistic children. Now, a lot has to come together, of course, to make this a reality. Of course, in the business world, industry common standards will need to be created. There will need to be a common language between applications. Governments have a role, certainly in privacy protection, to enable smooth transfer of information. From a technology standpoint, some things are just a given. The Internet of Things, billions of devices connected, high-performance, reliable connectivity. But also, there are those fundamental building blocks of all of IT, information technology, that we should not ever take for granted. Those building blocks of compute, storage, and networking. It is easy to believe or to fall into the trap of believing that past experience or past advancements in each of these building blocks is indicative of what is yet to come. But I will tell you that the technology barriers that are upon us today have literally never been this great. Basic laws that have predicted past progress are going away. And the economics that have fueled past progress are essentially under pressure. So we have work to do. We have work to do as a company and as an industry to overcome what I think are immense barriers in front of us. I want to get specific. It starts with performance. I think you'll agree with me that user experience of any service depends on performance. And if you don't have user experience, you really don't have anything. Performance essentially depends on the rate at which you can process, store, and move information. Compute, storage, networking. And here's the thing about performance. That law that we call Moore's Law, that has helped us in making massive, and I mean massive, thousands of % of improvement in the performance of compute, storage, and networking over the last few decades, is coming to an end. In 1999, what was Moore's Law, where the number of transistors on a die of given size doubled every 18 months, slowed to 24 months. Today, we're at 36 months. And while we can continue to make the transistor smaller, we can't make it faster, and we likely cannot even make it cheaper. Now, this is not all that new. However, there is a solution that this industry has jumped on, that we might not even understand why we've jumped on it, but the bottom line is it really stems from this fundamental barrier. And it comes out to scale out. There is no better example of the end of Moore's Law and the solution to that problem than that of the modern-day supercomputer, otherwise known as the data center. See, when we reached the limits of what anybody can do with a single CPU, we moved to multi-core. You remember when you used to buy your PCs when you were a kid and you actually cared about how fast the CPU was running? Today, it's just about the number of cores. We moved from there, of course, when we exhausted the limits of multi-core processors, to stacks of servers that are connected through a high-performance fabric. And of course, when we reached the limits of a rack, we went to a data center. When we reached the limits of a data center, we connected data centers together. And as we pool compute and storage resources in the cloud to reap the economies of scale, what we essentially do is we put distance between the infrastructure, compute storage, or the applications and workloads on that infrastructure, and the consumers of that infrastructure, which of course puts tremendous pressure on that connection between the consumers and the actual infrastructure itself. That's the network. many of the incredible services that we enjoy today would not be possible without that network. And here's the thing about the end of Moore's Law. It affects networking just as much as it affects compute. The incredible progress and performance gains we have seen as an industry in building high-performance switches, routers, firewalls over the years is only going to get increasingly more difficult. It is precisely for this reason that even networking is going scale out. More and more use cases that we were building with big boxes will move to an array of smaller devices. It is precisely for this reason that Juniper innovates in technologies like fabric technologies. Virtual chassis fabric essentially gives you the benefits of scale out without the operational complexity of having to manage and operate thousands of individual elements. It's the reason why we develop products like Contrail that allow us to create virtual networks and connect them with intricate policies without having to configure individual physical devices. There are many reasons why we see this trend in networking, but I would submit to you that the most important reason is the end of Moore's Law. Let's move on. Economics. Innovation, at the end of the day, requires resources. And this is an industry where 90% of our resources are stuck in keeping the lights on, in maintaining legacy. So how is it that we are going to innovate? How is it that we are going to create this exciting future that's ahead of us if 90% of us are just keeping the lights on? Well, we need to replace old work with new work. And I believe that the answer to that comes down to that simple to say but much harder to do word of automation. And I will say that, automation, it sometimes conjures up some misconceptions. Some people think of automation as this thing that's a job killer. I believe automation is the thing that frees up capacity to innovate. Some people look at automation as somewhat tactical in nature, a bunch of scripts running on a router that solves some work that you would otherwise need to do manually. I think automation is the next big thing in networking. And you know what? It actually doesn't really matter what you or I think about automation or the emotions that it might create as we talk about the subject, but the economics of automation are simply inescapable. While the unit cost of humans only increases in time, the unit cost of machines plummets in time. The economics are inescapable. You might have heard of a story about Milton Friedman, the famous economist, Nobel laureate. He was visiting a developing Asian nation and was taken through what is a public works project. And Friedman was astonished at how many people, how many of the workers were using picks and shovels, and how little there were of heavy machinery, bulldozers and such. So he inquired, he asked, why? And the response was, well, it's part of a jobs program for the country. Friedman's response to that has become somewhat legendary. Well, if it's a jobs program, why not give the workers spoons instead of shovels? In the Industrial Revolution in the United States, weaving was getting very rapidly automated. And that, of course, prompted many workers to seek different jobs in the weaving industry that could not be automated, like running the machinery itself or running the factories. In the 19th century, productivity of weaving in the US increased by a factor of 50. the amount of labor required to produce a yard of fabric reduced by a factor of 98%. What did that end up doing? It crushed the price of cloth, crushed the price of clothing, increased demand dramatically, and ultimately resulted in a 4 times increase in the number of jobs in this industry. Automation is inevitable, and it is good. It frees up the capacity for us to innovate. Now, I believe that this industry has taken a bit of a timid view of automation. Like I said, I think people think of it as somewhat tactical. So Juniper, we're putting a stake in the ground with a much bolder vision. It's a vision that we call self-driving networks. And it starts with the ability to gather massive amounts of data and information from the network, not using old polling techniques, but with high-performance, highly distributed architectures that suck information. That's very valuable for a variety of different things. That information will be fed through modern compute principles like machine learning and big data analytics to create real value. And that value will come in the form of predictive and adaptive networks, networks that essentially understand where the issues are before they actually happen and do something about it before they actually take place. They're essentially self-healing. And networks that are very highly efficient, both in terms of their utilization, but also in terms of how much manual work is required to keep them running. Let's move on to number 3. Interoperability. You know, the internet is a true testament to the power of interoperability. We should all, everybody in this industry should be immensely proud of how we have built the internet and IP and the interoperability aspects of IP to create what is the greatest platform for innovation the world has ever seen. That's the internet. And certainly, as we think about this era of digital cohesion, there will need to be whole new levels of interoperability, applications talking and so on. But sometimes I reflect on this and I have to say that I'm somewhat astonished at how rare IP is from an interoperability standpoint. It's almost like a standout. There are many layers above and below that do not benefit from the same level of interoperability. Close to home, there's that thing right below us that's called the optical network. And for anybody that's ever done anything in optical networks, they know that decisions in optical networks are all or nothing decisions. You make a decision on one element, you have just made that decision on the entire network. That's just because of the lack of interoperability that exists in this layer of the network. Furthermore, we believe that the barriers, the performance barriers that I just talked about, do not permit us to be wasteful of capacity or of bandwidth. And for that reason, these layers must come together. We must operate and manage them as one to free up the capacity that is locked today in the inefficiency of running multiple layers. See, at Juniper, we don't want to be an optical company. What we do want to be is somebody that will truly disrupt the economics of networking by collapsing these layers together and creating great value in the form of highly automated packet optical networks with never before seen level of efficiency in how easy they are to run and in unlocking the trapped potential, trapped capacity that exists in the inefficiency of multiple layers today. The last topic I want to talk about, or the last barrier, is this issue of trust. And I don't think I need to convince you of the importance of this in enabling the future that is ahead for us. See, it's the very success of IP as that one unifying protocol that has created the internet, that has essentially made the internet and IP networks around the world the target of bad guys, the target of malicious intent. You know, if IP was not this successful or this ubiquitous, we probably wouldn't have as much of a problem right now from a security standpoint. Now, I also think you might agree with me when I say that today's security posture is not going to work for the future that is ahead of us. And a new way of thinking about security from an architectural standpoint needs to come about. There are a couple of basic things that we think about at Juniper when we look at security. First and foremost, we cannot continue to just rely on where the firewalls need or happen to be in the network to detect where issues exist or to enforce policy that stops the bad guys from making any progress. Furthermore, we fundamentally believe that the best way to stop an attack is to convert it from an unknown to a known. And one of the most important use cases of automation is to make the known as widely known as possible. This is one of the most important use cases that we're applying for automation as it pertains to the future of security. Now, we pulled this strategy together in something that we call at Juniper the software-defined secure network. And we could not be more excited about the progress that we are making here, the reception from our customers and partners of this vision. And Jonathan will talk to you a little bit later about some real products that we're introducing that make this a true reality. Let me summarize. Performance, huge barrier because of the end of Moore's law. Scale out is the answer. Economics, we must free up the capacity to innovate and to advance the state of the art in IT and in networking, of course. Automation is the answer. We should not settle for anything less than 100% interoperability at every single layer of the network. And last but not least, trust is solved when every element of the network participates in the overall security posture of that network. Future is exciting. The future is interesting. And I don't know about you, but I can't tell you how excited I am, not just to participate in it, but to partner with all of you to make it a reality. Thank you very much.